That was from the trailer for The Matrix, and we are the Slash Filmcast broadcasting on the 20th anniversary, or very close to the 20th anniversary, of the film's release way back in 1999. So in order to get a guest for this episode of the show, I put the call out on Twitter. I asked Twitter, hey, who on Twitter is the person who you think is most knowledgeable about The Matrix? And I got, I don't know, dozens of responses.
All the people that suggested Keanu, we heard you.
Yeah, we did.
He was not available.
He was not available. That's true. So we took the second best thing, which is many people responded with one name. And that name is the name belonging to the person who is a guest on the Slash Filmcast today. He is a staff writer at The Atlantic. He's also the co-host and co-founder of the Blank Check podcast. David Sims, welcome to the Slash Filmcast. David, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I am very much a distant second to Keanu Reeves, but I do appreciate being here. Thank you so much for having me.
As are we all in
As are
all
we all,
respects. Yes. In every respect.
We really appreciate you being here. To David, David Sims has written a piece for The Atlantic about The Matrix entitled "A Movie Like The Matrix Might Never Happen Again." This was published on March 31st to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the film. I just want to say before we begin that I'm a huge fan of David and Griffin's podcast Blank Check, which is a podcast that I think anyone who listens to the Slash Filmcast and enjoys it would probably like that podcast as well. So strongly recommend. Check that out. But let's dive into The Matrix right now. And I think a way to start this conversation is to kind of talk about our most recent viewing experience of The Matrix and also our first viewing experience of The Matrix, right? We all recently rewatched The Matrix on its 20th anniversary, and there's probably like things that struck us differently this time around. So I want to talk about like what was your reaction to it most recently, and then feel free to share about your first reaction to it as well. David Sims, let's start with you.
Sure. I knew the anniversary was coming up, and in New York, and the Alamo Drafthouse had a whole Wachowskis series that they did, and I went to see the sequels, the Matrix sequels, in the theater because I had not seen them in the theater. You know, I knew that would be a funny and strange experience. And then after doing that, I rushed right back and watched The Matrix at home. Now I've seen The Matrix, dozens of times, I would say, over the years. I owned it on VHS or whatever. I've had it.
I paid
in my library since I was a teenager.
I paid $25 for like a widescreen VHS copy from Suncoast Video. Yeah.
Oh man, that was cheap for VHS. I remember, man. Yeah.
And I mean, I probably hadn't seen it in a couple years. Last time I watched it was probably for my podcast whenever we recorded that episode a couple years ago. But it's just I always find it's a movie that I remember every beat of. It's not just the lines that the iconic lines I can quote back. I remember like that Keanu's hand is gonna like poke out and stick Agent Smith in the neck in that little kung fu scene they have.
The crowd cheers when that happens. Yeah,
exactly. I remember all those little things.
Yeah. You may block the punch, but you cannot block the fingers.
Exactly. I mean, I always think about it where I'm like, is that just to irk him? Like, there's no tactical advantage to just sort of poking him in the neck there, is there? Like, he's an unkillable computer.
It's true. He doesn't need to breathe. It doesn't matter if you like poke him in the neck. Yeah.
And so it has for me become a little bit one of those movies that it's hard to look at it with a critical eye anymore because you're just so familiar with it. And I did have to look at it with a critical eye a little bit because I was supposed to write about it. But I like all of the Wachowskis movies. I like the sequels to the Matrix movies. I like, all of their more difficult and inaccessible works.
Speed Racer
is magnificent. Cloud Atlas, is a lovely film. But I will. There is something magical about the Matrix where you're like, I can't believe which is what I wrote about. Was like, I can't believe they pulled this off and it's coherent. Like, that they sort of dumped all these influences and all their sort of like fascinations into this one hero journey action movie, and it it all just sort of like makes sense.
Yeah, so I kind of went back into the archives for this episode of the podcast. I rewatched The Matrix. I rewatched The Matrix Revisited, which is
I saw
The Matrix.
That was good.
I owned that.
So I have the 4K Blu-ray of The Matrix, and there's a 4K UHD version, and then there's a Blu-ray that has The Matrix Revisited on it, and that movie was shot in like 4:3 format, so it like looks pretty rough. But what was kind of hilarious about that, watching The Matrix Revisited, was that it was clearly released as a way to promote the Matrix sequels. So there's this whole section at the beginning about how they're working really hard on The Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions.
Don't worry, guys. It's gonna be good.
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. And so
Dude, I could not have been more excited about anything. When
Right?
I heard they were making 2 sequels to The Matrix. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
In the same year, nothing could go wrong with that plan. Let's just dump them all within 6 months of each other.
So I want to point a couple things out. First of all, David Sims
That's
had
me.
mounted probably the most convincing defense of The Matrix Reloaded ever put to tape
I
on
like
the
that
Black Check
movie.
podcast, right?
I still like
It's a
that.
great movie.
Which episode? Do you recall which episode that was, David Sims, by any chance?
It's The Matrix Reloaded. We had a Wachowskis miniseries, so we did one episode per movie, and the Matrix ones, which we recorded, I think, very close together. You know, they get real loopy, but Reloaded is where I am trying to at least explain what they're trying to get at with it. Even though I understand that, especially on first viewing, it is an extremely unsympathetic to the audience.
It is an
probably
incredible,
the nicest way to put it.
It is an incredible
man.
defense of the film, and I'd recommend anyone. I don't think we're probably going to get to it today on this episode.
Of course not. Yeah, it's a
Um,
whole other ball of yarn.
Yeah,
Can I
but-
say something about Reloaded though? Like that movie was one of those perfect cinematic memories where during the Zion rave scene, that thing was just like going on, and I looked around at the audience, and everyone else was just like looking at each other. It's like, what is happening? What are we watching?
Yeah,
I love that.
But watching The Matrix Revisited, David, I was thinking about how it really is remarkable. Yeah, all these influences: anime, John Woo films, Eastern and Western philosophy. Like all this stuff just comes together in a package that was not at all, like, success was not at all assured. They were inventing new technologies to make this movie work. And the fact that people gave them $60 million to do it, the fact that they achieved it, and that it was not only good, but great, amazing even, one of the best films of the last decade or a couple decades, is remarkable. And so that was what I was struck by watching The Matrix Revisited again, was how unlikely it was that this movie would be successful.
My favorite thing about that sentence, Dave, is that we are literally here doing this podcast because it is the 20th anniversary of The Matrix, and you said it's one of the best movies of the last decade.
Yeah.
I said decades, Jeff, decades.
Yeah, it didn't quite compute.
You said decade or couple decades.
Couple
And we're-
decades. Couple decades.
The entire reason we're here is that it's 2 decades.
2 decades, Jeff. 2 decades.
I just
Also,
wanted to put
we're all old now.
Yeah,
God.
that's true.
All right, Devinder Hardawar, as you rewatched The Matrix again recently,
Yes.
thoughts that flowed through your head?
So the main thing first of all, I really wish I was able to see this in the theater again. It is criminal that this event, this momentous event in pop culture happened, and we did not celebrate it as we should. And I think there was like 1 or 2 screenings at the Alamo here in New York. But yeah,
It's because all the movie theaters were taken up with the Cruel Intentions 20th anniversary. I don't know if
This
you
is
saw
true.
that. Yeah,
This is true. All the important stuff.
Yep.
10 Things I Hate About You. We also have to celebrate that, and I will celebrate that.
Great movie.
Yeah, great movie. But The Matrix, I really want. I think I only saw it once on the big screen, honestly, because it was like in the middle of high school for me. So I was sad that we didn't really get to celebrate this movie as much as we should have. But yeah, watching the 4K Blu-ray, this movie is revamped in HDR, in Dolby Vision with Dolby Atmos sound. It looks better than I can even remember. Certainly better than it did in the a crappy theater I saw it in Hartford. Everything's so crisp, so clean. I'm glad. This is a geeky thing. I'm glad they kind of fixed the color grading, because I don't know if you guys remember this, but when The Matrix hit Blu-ray, they remastered the first movie to basically be a bit more green, like Reloaded and Revolutions were. And that always kind of irked me, because my Matrix DVD, I watched it so much, it was bluish. It was a little different, and it was really weird to see it in HD, and just very differently than what I remembered. This release kind of cuts that back a little, and I kind of appreciate that. On the tech side of things, like, this movie just looks amazing. I think they did a great job with like the HDR stuff. Like, if you have a TV that supports it, the explosions, my favorite shot to show off HDR is like the slow fire explosion when they blow up the elevator. Tremendous. Chef's kiss. Perfect. This movie still looks amazing. I think it works so well. And when we talk about cultural relevancy, this is it. This is it, Jeff. When we're talking about cultural relevancy, like, this is what I'm saying. Like, a movie that everybody copied, a movie that everybody references, a movie where the entire culture, we can all remember specific scenes and moments. You, David, like you mentioned, the fingers popping out to, chop Agent Smith in the neck. Like, that's it. That's a half-second moment. And we all have that in our consciousness, I think. And I think that it just goes to show, like, the power of this movie. So I've always loved it. It's been kind of tough to be a Matrix fan. I think originally it was great. Everybody loved it. Then, I think the fandom itself got a little annoying. It's been parodied time and time again since the release of this movie. Then the MRAs happened. And then, like, the red pill crap happened. And it got so weird to truly love this movie. But I think now with the revival, I can, you could look back and just say how important this movie is. I've always considered it one of the most important movies ever made. And it still seems like that 20 years later.
Yeah. To comment on what you said, I was Googling for the color grading, the change, right? And there is this thread on this this website called Reset Era, I think. And the title of the thread is "The Matrix no longer looks like puke green in its UHD release." And they have like a screenshot of the Blu-ray and a screenshot of the Ultra HD version. And wow, it is very, very different. So
they ruined it. They ruined it on Blu-ray. Right. It's insane.
The new 4K release is highly recommended. So Jeff Kanata, your thoughts on The Matrix 20 years later?
I'm certainly on board for this being culturally relevant. You will get no argument from me. You need not persuade me. I mean, it is it's crazy to me sitting here 20 years later that this came out in 1999, because if you had just asked me, if I had not been aware of, the last few years, I'm not really thinking about The Matrix too much, you'd asked me what year it came out, I would have said much earlier. I was working at a movie theater for the years that I was in high school, and I remember vividly the year that Speed came out, 1994, and it being this absolute gobsmacking, what, Keanu Reeves can do something good? What? And I remember us getting the poster for Speed early, and all laughing about a bus and Keanu Reeves and thinking it was going to be a terrible movie, and then just being bowled over by how great Speed was. And then I remember The Matrix, the build up to The Matrix, and going, no, Keanu's good now. Keanu's good.
I have to say, though, Jeff, there was no love for Bill and Ted among your friend group? No love for Point Break? Come on.
Well, both of those things can be loved in a way that you wouldn't be surprised that we'd be laughing at a straight up action movie starring the same guy. Like those are ironic joys. Those are joys where you're in on the gag. It's wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Look how ridiculous Keanu is.
But Point Break is like literally a straight up action movie too. Like, and still one of the best. So it seemed like a logical transition. I guess we kind of forgot too. Like Point Break, I don't remember in the 90s. I don't even remember if I saw that movie back then. So I don't remember what cultural impact that movie had at the time.
But my recollection, the reason I'm even bringing all of this up is that my recollection of it is so flawed, because I would never have told you that there were 5 years between Speed and The Matrix. It feels like a bang bang in my head, right?
Yeah.
And there are two sides to cultural relevance as well, because I also wouldn't have been able to tell you that The Matrix came out on March 31st in 1999, and the Columbine shooting was April 20th.
Jeez, yep.
It seemed to me like The Matrix was around and we were all loving it and it was this thing, and then Columbine happened and it sort of recontextualized it for me, and black coats and lots of guns were marred in my brain, and it didn't feel like that close. I mean, that's just 3 weeks later. That's
It was
insane.
great. I think that was also an event that made me rethink, like, man, I'm sure the Wachowskis, like, when they were making this, like, had no clue how their work could be bastardized at the time. But that was definitely the first sign. I was like, oh shit, this thing is so powerful. People are going to go crazy with it in wild and terrible ways.
Yeah. I mean, and that the fact that that happened so quickly after that, I would never been able to tell you. Like I'm looking at the facts now, but it's a crazy thing how that time doesn't seem as compressed. It seems The Matrix had such a big footprint on my life that it feels like it was longer ago, and it feels like it was around for longer for all those things. And yeah, and it changed everything. It sort of single-handedly brought Chinese martial arts choreography into the West.
So basically good choreography into Hollywood action movies. Because like this was the start, right?
It allowed Jackie Chan to have a career in America. Like that movie single-handedly did that. It had a huge impact on filmmaking, I think.
Well, Rumble in the Bronx came out in 1995.
Yeah. The Jackie Chan revival. It was his second revival in America. It did start a couple years before The Matrix.
Yeah, but I agree with you that The Matrix introduced martial arts into mainstream action films in a big way, right? And actually, like, Chad Stahelski did an interview with Vulture about this, where he's like, before The Matrix, most of the action scenes would be, quote, single gun battle stuff or Arnold Schwarzenegger pummeling you to death with his hands.
Yeah.
With
a catchphrase. Like that's action.
Yeah, car chases, horse chases, helicopter chases, motorboat chases, that kind of stuff. And then after The Matrix, right, we have movies like John Wick, also starring Keanu Reeves, right? Like movies where martial arts and hand-to-hand combat is a huge part of it.
Chad was like he was his body double, right?
Yeah, stunt double, yeah.
Stunt double, and now he's directing the John Wick movies.
That's
but
right.
The thing is, like every single movie, like you couldn't be an action movie and not like recognize what The Matrix did.
I mean, look at like Charlie's Angels, like the Charlie's Angels franchise, like just its entire identity is influenced by The Matrix, right?
I think, by the way, what we're saying is also making the actors kind of do the work, at least have some sort of training.
That was another thing that was another thing that stuck out to me when I was watching The Matrix Revisited is that like it was Joel Silver talking to the Wachowskis and saying, "Hey, don't worry, Wachowskis, we'll get the people that know how to do the martial arts, and they'll be the stunt doubles for all the thing." And it was super important to them, to the Wachowskis, that Lawrence Fishburne and Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss, like that they all actually did the things themselves, and they had to train for months, like 4 months to do it. That was
never
not
been done before, and now it's like it's not common, but it's still a thing. I think some people would expect for certain action movies.
Right? Yeah. So Jeff, I want to let you finish up, and then
So I know I'm dragging on here, but it really it impacted me as I think the film also has comic book sensibilities, and the frames are composed in ways that we weren't really seeing very many people do in that way. They really felt like comic book frames in a lot of ways, and I think that has had a long lasting shadow, and kind of brought into the lexicon of film a visual style that I think has really taken over, and I was obsessed with this movie. I loved this movie. I watched it many, 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 many times. I haven't watched it in many years, but around that time in the early 2000s, I loved this movie. My roommate at the time actually worked on The Matrix Reloaded. He was on set for the big
Burley Brawl?
The freeway chase.
Oh, man.
They literally
built the best part of that movie.
Yeah, they built a freeway for that movie in Los Angeles, and he participated. And so, like, it just was part of my filmic passion for so long. And it's cool to come back to it because I haven't watched it in so many years. And there's a lot of stuff I'm sure we'll get to that I remembered, but didn't remember exactly the way it played out. like David was saying, there are indelible marks, and there's so much of this movie that is just stamped in my brain. But revisiting it, I feel like I could have, told you many, many lines from this movie, told you all the sequences, but in rewatching, I was like, oh yeah, that comes before that. Oh, that,
yeah.
It was a really fun experience revisiting The Matrix and watching with fresh eyes and kind of seeing it in the light of, countless superhero movies and how genre film itself has taken over Hollywood. We didn't have genre movies like this at the clip we get them now. This was very special. This sensibility, this sort of smart sci-fi action movie. We didn't get that.
This was the beginning, right? This was the beginning of big genre risks, and Lord of the Rings was happening amidst all this, and that was an even bigger gamble.
Though. Yeah.
2001, but that was a bigger gamble, and that took like years to prep. I remember like hearing about all the prep for that, but without the Matrix, I don't think we would have gotten with the superhero movies where we are now. In a way, like it all kind of directly leads to that.
Yeah, and basically, The Matrix is a superhero origin story.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very much so. So, and I remember freaking out about that when I watched the movie for the first time and seeing him fly away and going, he's Superman. Yeah. This is a Superman origin story.
One of the best final shots ever.
Yeah. All right, I'll share a few thoughts, and then let's dive into the actual film itself. And, of course, we should say that the movie's 20 years old, and probably everyone who's listening has seen the movie, but we will spoil the hell out of this thing. So I want to echo David Sims' thoughts about knowing, watching the movie so much that you kind of know it in a way that you don't know other movies. Like, I would memorize portions of the script and then kind of say them along as I rewatched it on my widescreen VHS kind of thing. So huge fan, very influential movie, obviously. And coming back to it, I'll just give 2 to 3 high level thoughts about my reactions. Number one, this movie gave so much to the culture, right? There are so many moments in this movie. There's so many moments that have become memes, right? So many elements of the style, right? From the styles, obviously, but also the martial arts.
The classic definition of meme. You use that term now, and I think it has a lot of baggage on it. It was a meme in the sense that it lodged into the brains of human culture, and not in the sense that people forwarded it around and went LOL at it.
No, but I would say it's both, Jeff. I mean, there's many memes based on the Matrix, right? There's literally what if I told you blank blank blank. If you go to meme generator or whatever, there's several things on there that are screenshots from the Matrix, like the Morpheus meme, Neo going whoa, Switch saying not like this. I mean, there's so many moments that people have repeated on social media decades later, and so it's both. It's both that it was it lodged into the memory, but also that literally it has become memes, and I think that's a testament to how memorable so many of the moments are. The other thing is, it's interesting to look back at this as the kind of one vision of the future of AI, right? And we just saw, Ex Machina was a movie that came out a couple years ago, which also expressed kind of fears of AI. But this movie, which came out roughly around the time when I think many of us were still using dial-up modems at home, and I remember when I got to college and getting a DSL line, that was amazing, right? I was I've never experienced internet this fast.
Yeah, this was pre-broadband for most.
This
people.
is pre-broadband, right? And so the fear that people had of AI and technology came in the form of machines like the Terminator, right? It was we imagined that it would be it's not networked AI that's going to take down our power grid or anything. It's literally physical devices that we're going to have to go to war against.
Yeah. It's also, by the way, it's kind of interesting seeing this vision of evil robots versus the Terminator, right? Because even Terminator 2, the idea of a global, network that we're all plugged into, and that is, the veil in front of reality, that would have been, you couldn't even understand that back then. You needed the internet. You needed the concept of the internet to even explain a movie like The Matrix and what they were trying to say.
Yeah.
But I also feel like The Matrix, rewatching it now, it feels like it could have been written today.
Oh, yeah.
It would it would actually be more relevant because we're sort of dealing with that fear manifest. People are actually writing articles about how maybe all this AI stuff that the big tech companies are working on is maybe we should pump the brakes on some of that.
Guys, people are talking about hacking the simulation of reality right now. Like I was at South by Southwest. George Hotz, Geo Hotz, a hacker famous for cracking the iPhone and PlayStation 3, I believe. He had a whole panel where he's just like, "Hey guys, I think we're gonna try to crack reality. Let's see where it goes." And this is the thing people are talking about. It's just hilarious.
Yeah, Elon Musk is saying that the probability of us actually living in a Matrix is high. People actually believe that's a possibility for real life.
It's a metaphor that has total utility in almost any. That's why it's so good. It's like in this movie and in the sequels, they sort of talk about it as like, well, do you feel depressed or like disconnected from reality? Well, the reason is that you're actually sitting in a pod and the reality is fake and only you've realized that. But then like like you guys are saying, you can use it now to be like, does reality itself seem like it's out of whack? Like, like
Yeah.
do things like feel like they're happening in ways that are just like fully implausible? Like maybe it's just the simulation is sort of like run out of scenarios and is lobbing anything it can at us. Like it's such a broad and useful metaphor for anything, which is one reason I feel like it became so lodged in the culture.
Even just the throwaway line about deja vu is so powerful and has it's such a enduring idea that's a glitch in the Matrix.
There's a subreddit called "Glitch in the Matrix." It is a thing that people repeat. This is what I'm talking about, memes, Jeff. Like it has become part of the meme culture as well. The Vulture did like a massive multi-article spread on the Matrix in February. And the cover story was "The Matrix Built Our Reality-Denying World," the movie that gave all of us a new way to see or reject everything, written by Mark Harris. I'll link to it in the show notes. It's a great article, and it basically asserts what you guys have been saying, that we live in a world where the President of the United States is a conspiracy theorist, right? Like,
I have to say, by the way, like that's a great piece. I really enjoy Mark Harris's writing. Plato is like, I'm right here. I've been here for thousands of years. What are you talking
about? Fair enough. But yeah, I mean, we live in a world where like our president's conspiracy theorists, where like people talk about fake news, and where there's like so many ways readily offered to reject reality. And the Matrix kind of feels like it foretold the modern era of doing that. So anyway.
And Vindra mentioned specifically the people who are most passionate about rejecting reality and finding conspiracy theories use the blue and red pill as their central metaphor for that.
Yeah.
I mean,
while totally missing the point of everything, but
exactly. It's an Ouroboros, it's eating its own tail.
Yeah. I mean, it is tragically ironic that, this movie, which is created by two trans women, and I think I was reading on Vox that it's like probably the most well-known and successful piece of art created by transgender people has been kind of co-opted in that way, and many people read The Matrix, in fact, as a allegory for coming out as transgender. And we're not going to get into that allegory too much on this podcast because I don't know that we're super well versed or equipped to do so, but that is like kind of part of the culture of this film, is like that allegory and how really despicable forces have co-opted it. So it is a shame, but the movie can live on for all of its, we can appreciate the movie as it was intended. So let's dive into the actual movie itself. Let's start talking about the actual film. Let's dive into the start of the film, which begins with this kind of phone call between Trinity and Cypher, and it's great because like this movie really just like immerses you into this situation. This movie just really immerses you into this situation without explaining anything, and it's one of those movies that rewards repeat viewings because like now you understand like what the context of their phone call is. You understand like what Cypher is talking about when he says we're going to kill him, and then what Trinity's talking about when she says, "Did you hear that? Are you sure this line is clean?"
It's kind of a surprisingly intimate conversation too. Like
Yeah.
just in the way they talk to each other, I found that kind of jarring this time. Like I forgot that's how they were talking to each other. Like they've been doing this for so long. They're old friends in a way.
Years at
Sure.
this point. Yeah.
I mean, as we learn, there's also that implication that Cypher kind of has a thing for Trinity.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's sort of probing her obsession with Neo, which she is sort of, denying a little bit. But, he's sort of cottoning on to the fact that she's, very intrigued and not cynical, or at least not as cynical as he is.
Right. So then you have this opening scene, which Tasha Robinson from The Verge was on our podcast recently and described it as one of the most badass character introductions of all time, right?
Hell yeah.
Which is Trinity doing like the midair crane kick, bullet time introduced immediately as she takes out these agents and escapes, and then gets to the exit.
Mm-hmm.
And
I have to say that's not my favorite part of the scene, by the way. My favorite part is when she sees the window and she just jumps for it and she flies down the stairs and turns and double pistols ready to go.
Yes.
Like that is iconic. That moment, that shot is burned into my brain forever.
And them knowing that it's super important to have that piece of hair right over her eye.
Yes.
It's so rad to have the hair over the eye.
Well, they do such a good job like increasing her vulnerability. Like, when she does the crane kick, she's basically like this invincible sort of nightmare. And then like, the little hair over the eye, this sort of like spot of blood she gets, like that they convey like she's getting panicked. This is hard. It's not like she's not superhuman.
Yeah.
Like
right.
this is a tenuous situation that they kind of like layer that in slowly is perfectly done.
She has fear, genuine fear in her eyes, and so we see that there's danger. It's not just like she's Superman here or Superwoman.
And she has to talk herself into getting up.
Yeah. I also like one of the things this movie does well. There's many things this movie does well, but one of them is at various points there's different characters who play audience surrogates. And there's one moment when the agent jumps across this huge street and like lands with his like gun in his hand, and then you see a close up on like the camera focuses on this cop, and he says, "That's impossible," right? And it's just like, it's just like amazing line delivery, and it's also that is the audience surrogate. Like you're watching it, like that's impossible, right? What that guy.
This whole scene, by the way, the dialogue in the scene is so like boilerplate 90s action movie in a way. Like they wait a little before they get really hard and the intricate stuff, but Smith saying your men are already dead. I feel like I've seen that in hundreds of movies, but it probably works best here.
Yeah.
Give me that jurist my diction crap. Cramming up your ass.
Grab it up your ass. That's right. Yeah.
And I love there's no part of this movie that feels more like it was storyboarded than it just feels like every single shot is composed and artful and is a comic book frame, and there's stuff happening in the corner, and there's forced perspective shots, and there's stuff with the stairs, and then like every little detail, the stairs looking down all have checkerboards at the bottom, and that is sort of a match on action to another downward shot, and the shot down with the rain, and like everything feels purposeful, and you're in a world, you're in hands that are confident and purposeful. I
don't think there's a movie that's been this like well thought out storyboard wise, I guess, not since it's Fury Road. And we know Fury Road was kind of storyboarded and thought out, like drawn out as a comic book similarly too. And that's kind of how they were able to like get a lot of those iconic shots, because it's been sitting in George Miller's brain, for decades. And it's clear this movie was like fully formed inside the Wachowskis.
I also like how the end of this sequence, right? Trinity gets to the exit line and she turns towards it. So first of all, this somehow the truck, this nearby truck seems like possessed and turns towards this phone booth. And then she kind of picks up the phone and puts her hand against the glass as the truck is barreling towards the phone booth and smashes the phone booth open. Agent gets out, and it's like there's a mystery. Many mysteries there. Like, how did the agent get in the truck? But also, what happened to Trinity? What happened there? And that's one of the things that I think this movie does well is it shows you kind of this mystery, and then later on shows you the same thing happening, but from a different perspective or with more revealed. And so then you find out later, like, what exactly happened in that scene with her. So
that's also the first scene, I think, where you have to explain to the kids. So that's a payphone, and there are these boxes that phones used to be in.
I didn't even think about that.
All over the street. Like, younger. Like, I've had this question, Dave, like from nieces and nephews of mine who are maybe 15 now, who still don't understand the concept of a payphone. It is insane.
So then you have Neo in his office. He's doing his hacking, as you do. And there's like a guy that buys stuff from him, and this interaction with the computer, follow the white rabbit. There's a bunch of little details in here that will repay repeat viewers. Things like the fact that his book is Simulation and Simulacra, which is a Baudrillard treatise. There's the fact that the drug dealer or the dealer guy says, like, "Hallelujah, you're my savior, man, my own personal Jesus Christ," a reference to the fact that Neo is a Christ figure in some ways. So then he follows the White Rabbit, obviously an Alice in Wonderland reference, and goes to meet Trinity for the first time. And then there's this whole kind of section of him being out in the real world, being a hacker. At the same time, he works at a company called Metacortex.
His Office Space scenes, by the way, this is all very Office Space. It's hilarious.
And Office Space came out the same year.
Yeah.
They are twin movies without a doubt. They are both movies about like the hell of cubicle life.
Both of these movies prepared me for my future, basically, and they taught me very afraid.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you guys this sort of overall meta question of Keanu, because I think that there are some incredible performances in this movie. I think, for my money, especially rewatching it, I am reminded that Hugo Weaving gives one of the great film villain performances of all time in this movie.
Definitely.
He's doing such heavy lifting in this movie to sell that shit. He is so great. And I think there are some really great performances. I think Carrie-Anne Moss is fantastic. I think Lawrence Fishburne is fantastic. What do you guys think of Keanu in this movie?
David Sims, why don't you answer that question?
I mean, look, could anyone else have done this? I think Keanu is very good at guilelessness. It's sort of his major forte, which is what makes a movie like John Wick so interesting, because it's a totally different energy, that we had not seen from him in a while. But like as Neo, it's all, I mean, his face is so like he's a pretty man. I'm like, how else am I supposed to say it? He's this pretty angular man, and he's very good at like receiving instruction and exposition. So much of this movie is exposition. And that's something that people complain about, rightly in a way, about like movies like Inception, these movies that are sort of like big downloads of like instruction manuals basically to the audience. And this movie does all the same stuff, but it does it so well because Keanu is such a willing sponge for like information and for, enlightenment and things like that. And if you had, I don't know if you guys did you guys see the Will Smith video? Like,
yes.
Where he was talking about how he turned it down and how the Wachowskis pitch like made no sense to him, and he was like, "I don't get it. I'll do Wild Wild West."
So Will Smith turned down the role of Neo. He was offered the role of Neo at one point, and he turned it down. Right. And he made a YouTube video explaining why. But yeah.
And if you imagine Will Smith in this role, like he would want to have a lot of personality. He would want to be like bouncing off everyone,
right?
And he'd want to be sort of like remarking on everything. And like I don't, who knows how this movie works with Will Smith and Val Kilmer, which was like one configuration, or like Johnny Depp and Gary Oldman, which was one configuration, or Sandra Bullock was supposed to be Neo at one point, or like that's
like the only interesting one I've heard. Yeah, of all these alternate castings.
Obviously, Sandra Bullock is like a Keanu, her and Keanu had such a great time together in Speed, but maybe Will Smith would have done something very interesting. Who knows? I mean, but Keanu is such a perfect like sort of blank willing center at the for the movie to sort of like feed all this information through.
Yeah. So basically, I think what David is saying is he was the right man for the job at the right time, Jeff.
What's
which,
funny
which
because
I kind of agree
it's
with.
funny because in the alternate universe where Will Smith is Neo or Johnny Depp is Neo, I think if we have this conversation and somebody goes, it could have been Keanu, we would all go, oh my God, no.
It kind of depends. Like, I think part of the magic of this movie is that so many of these actors, Carrie-Anne Moss, Lawrence Fishburne, everybody gave themselves up to the insanity, like fully gave themselves into this premise and the work it took to even train for a movie like this. If if it was Val Kilmer not wanting to do the fight choreography, or even Will Smith, I can't. I really like Will Smith as a performer. As an actor, I've noticed like he is afraid of taking chances. At least like,
Right.
and that's something we
Especially
saw like
now.
especially now. But like, who would have thought, like, looking at Will Smith's career now and Jamie Foxx's career, who would have thought, telling us in the 90s that Jamie Foxx would be the more daring actor for the next few decades? That would seem insane, but that's kind of where we've ended up. So yeah, I guess for this movie, I'm just saying it is such a special mixture of people who gave their all. You don't always see that, and yeah, something I appreciate more every time I see it.
I don't mean to slag on Keanu. I think his physical performance in all three of these movies,
Yeah,
and what we've seen him also put into John Wick physically is extraordinary. He committed himself. You believe those fights. You see him do it, and you believe it. He is there. You see a young man who you don't expect to be able to do extraordinary things, then do extraordinary things, and it is a transformation that is, I think, sells the fact that the Matrix is special, not the film, but the construct inside the film, that he downloaded kung fu into his head and now can do it like that. He sells that in a way that is admirable. I brought it up as we talk about this section of the movie because I think this section of the movie is the one that suffers the most from him and that blankness that you talk about, David, that sort of empty vesselness that he can bring, that I think is maybe the downside of Keanu. An actor I like and I admire in a lot of ways, but this section, in rewatching it, I noticed, there's a moment where he, has to walk out on a ledge and he chickens out and doesn't do the hero thing that I think could have landed so much better with a stronger performance in that moment. And there are moments in that initial section that feel flatter than I think they could have been with another actor. So
there's the interrogation scene, right? When the Agent Smith is interrogating Neo. And it's a great speech. I memorized that speech because it's so kind of menacing and so I don't know. Just I love the way Hugo Weaving speaks in this movie. It's very
dude. It is one of the great. I am so impressed, having seen his career where it's gone since, and knowing the choices he's making. This is sort of his breakout performance too. The first time American audiences really saw him, or at least I did.
Yeah,
and he's putting such stank on everything. I mean, that little grimace that he gives during the interrogation where he talks about, Keanu, I can't remember what it comes after, but Keanu tells him something and he recounts that he does something nice for someone and he just can't stomach it.
Helps his landlady carry out her garbage.
Yeah,
that's right,
her
garbage.
Yeah,
and he can't stomach it. It is so good. It is so good. And it
is.
I think he does not get the credit he deserves for just owning that and bringing so much to the delivery of what are great lines in and of themselves and flowery language that you get to chew on, but he chews on it in a way that few could. I am so impressed in rewatching it and reminding myself what he brought to that role.
But what I was gonna say was I was kind of agreeing with you that like there's this moment when when Neo says, why don't I give you the finger and you give me my phone call? And it's supposed to be like this guy who's having this cool guy who's like has all this attitude, and it's like I don't know, like that just doesn't strike me as him really that much. I didn't really buy it that much. But then when the guy's mouth starts melting and he starts freaking out. That I believe. So,
and Hugo Weaving has the great intro to that too. It's like, what if you couldn't speak or something like?
Yeah.
Like how he says it. What if you can't speak? It's so good, man. It's so good.
Yeah. David Sims, I'm sure we're killing you with these like mangled line readings, but just know that we'll probably put sprinkle the audio of the actual film throughout this thing, so people can take solace in that. But yeah, there's this physicality that Keanu brings to this role that I think is truly excellent, and that's very present in this movie. In this scene where they actually like put makeup on him and got him to like fuse his mouth shut. He said apparently shooting it took like 5 hours, and they didn't plan. He didn't plan on not being able to speak for 5 hours, so they didn't have like pen and paper or anything ready for that, and it made it a little complicated. But anyway, so then they put this bug in him. He wakes up. Maybe it's a dream, and they take him to Lawrence Fishburne playing Morpheus. And this whole time, like. You're just, as the viewer, you're starting to, like, the world is starting to expand outward in concentric circles, right? You're starting to realize, you're seeing a little bit more of these world. Like, here's what the agents are like. Oh, here's what the people who are against agents are like. And, oh, wow, the bug is actually real? Like, maybe what we're seeing before us is not what we've been led to believe. And then, of course, Morpheus gives that amazing speech, this huge exposition dump about what the Matrix is. And then they offers the red pill and the blue pill, which he then takes. And then... that is when he is transferred out of the Matrix at that point. So any thoughts on this sequence before we move on? If not, I'll just cut this part out and we'll just move on. So
I'm stealing from my blank check co-host, Griffin Newman, but Morpheus just like is really good at sitting in a chair.
So good.
Like
this is the best.
Lawrence Fishburne somehow can make sitting in a chair feel like an active choice. You know what I mean? Because he's sitting in a chair here. He then sits in a chair again for the second exposition scene that he has. Another 10 minutes of talking about what the Matrix is and how it's everywhere. And I don't know. It's hard to sit in a chair and feel like you are energetic and dominating the conversation. And he's very
monk-like.
It's very
way.
Regal. It's a very regal performance.
Yes.
This is a man who is supremely confident in what he is saying.
I forget if his glasses, if he's going with the arms-free glasses or not.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's
the pince nez.
So he's just sitting there concentrating on keeping the glasses on. Like, that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Just keep the glasses on. And the work in the glasses too, with the imagery in the glasses of Keanu's in both, but one hand has the red pill, one hand has the blue. One glass has one hand in each. That stuff is just so strong, so unique. Even even the stuff in the car where they pull the thing out of his belly button, the way it like slaps the back of the tube and has goo on it. Everything is so memorable. The fact that the car stops in the tunnel with the water cascading down.
I love the tool they use to get the bug out. You could see the visualization of it too, and it's like this just like truly messed up sonogram in a way, like a crazy real-time sonogram. This movie has so much. It opens with such insane like body horror that I think a lot of people didn't expect based on the trailer too. Like going into it, like this movie does not take its time to get weird, and I kind of love that immediately.
Yeah. So then he wakes up in this thing of goo, and you see this horrifying image of all these crops of humans, and he's flushed out of there, and then wakes up at the Nebuchadnezzar, which we see in a plaque was made in the USA in the year 2069. And then what follows is like a bunch of little exposition dumps where Morpheus brings him into not the Matrix, but like the training programs and the dojo.
Before that, I love the the needle sequences, like the whole thing of like basically building him up to be a human being that can support his own body, because he's never done that before.
Why do my eyes hurt? Because you've never used them before.
Never used them.
Yeah.
So good. We're trying to rebuild your muscles. It's so well thought out and evocative.
And then this is the critical part of the movie where they actually explain like what is actually going. They explain the premise of the movie through this very cool kind of computer program. Welcome to the desert of the real. They're sitting in these chairs watching this TV. And it's as exposition times go, it's actually really effective, I think, right? Like,
this is hard to do.
Yeah, it's hard to do well, and I think they do a good job. And there's this combination of imagery and ominous voiceover, and it's really effective at convincing you that, hey, maybe a human being could supply more energy than it consumes. But yeah, who knows if entropy would actually
let's just
allow
go
that.
along with that.
Let's
for
just go.
now.
Let's go along with it. Yeah.
It is a great example of showing and telling at the same time, and I think like a lot of movies have attempted things like this since then, and I don't think nothing has done it that well.
It's hard. I mean, Inception is the one that always comes to mind, and
Yeah.
it does a pretty good job. You know, obviously I like the movie, but you know, whenever things are being explained, it feels like the movie has ground to a halt.
Yeah.
And in The Matrix, it doesn't feel like that at all, because you're like, tell me more. I want to like the audience, I feel like, is eager. Like, give me explanations. That's hard. Obviously, hard to get the audience in the palm of your hand.
Inception
like
is like, let's talk about how time works at different levels of dreams. Everybody,
right. It's very
I do want to give a shout out to the Animatrix at this point, which. In my opinion, the most effective things on the Animatrix are the Second Renaissance Parts 1 and 2, which kind of fills in a ton of exposition about like what exactly happened with the machines, and it's done in this very effective anime style, and it's chilling. There's like this it's more violent and upsetting than the Matrix is, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's
violent.
animated. Yeah. So
there's that thing where the guy's brain falls out of his head.
Oh,
Ugh.
they're beating up the naked female robot.
Oh yeah, when they're beating up the naked female robot,
her.
When
that is rough.
The robot crushes the guy's head. When there's this part when like the machines go to war with man, and then like you see the machines basically like brutally like kill all these guys in these mech suits. But it is a super plausible. Overall, a very like I don't know that when the AIs come for humanity that it's going to play out exactly like this, but it feels very plausible as to like that is a version of the future that could easily happen in our world.
And
so,
what I love about these things is that humanity is there's nothing good about humanity actually. Like we did this to ourselves.
Right.
We took advantage of these robots. We destroyed the Earth. What do you expect?
Yeah, our big plan was to blot out the sun.
Right.
That was our big plan, and everybody got behind that idea.
We literally used our big idea, copied our big idea from Mr. Burns and The Simpsons.
Nobody went. What happens when we win and there's no sun? Nobody.
Listen, that's a future problem. Okay.
The other thing that occurred to me during my rewatch is something I did not remember, and that is that Morpheus actually explains how they first got out of the Matrix, and it's super flimsy. I didn't remember this at all, but it's basically just one guy could do stuff that nobody else
like
can.
It doesn't hold together, which they explain later on in the series. But yes,
it's so funny. He's just like, there was one guy and he could manipulate the Matrix and he busted the rest of us out. It's like, you don't want to explain that a little more?
Listen, I think you get the sense that this is all like stuff that's been handed down over time too. Like he's not sure. This is all like told history. At this
he's
point.
like, as best as we can tell, it's the year 2020 or 2200 or like he doesn't exactly know when things are. But this is such an amazing way of doing exposition, is like having these simulated worlds, right? You have like the dojo scene where he finally like I know Kung Fu, show me the jump program. Right, the woman with the red dress scene, like all these, it's like, hey, we're gonna explain exposition in the most interesting way possible, which is like showing and not telling, and
action that's conveying story too, action rooted in character, and that's progressing the plot in the story. I have to say, guys, when the dojo scene, the first time I saw that dojo scene, I had to restrain myself from like getting up and clapping in the theater because I'm somebody who grew up watching kung fu movies and all sorts of martial arts films, and like just kind of stewing with the fact that Hollywood just can never get it right. No matter what they do, they can never get it right. They could bring I forget if Lethal Weapon 4 happened before or after this, but like they could bring Jet Li into a movie and just completely waste him. This movie did it. And that was such a transformative moment for everybody.
And they do such a smart thing and such a brilliant thing in having the moment in the Nebuchadnezzar where he's like, hey, everybody, Neo and Morpheus are fighting. And they all get up. It's like, talk about an audience surrogate. It's like, oh, this is special. You know, it's the Simpsons. Hey, it's Bart and he's doing stuff. You know, it is so. And then the sequence in The Jump where they're all like, he's not going to do it. Do you think he's going to do it? And then, you know, Trinity's like, I believe. It's so perfectly amps up the emotional stakes of that moment, and it makes you feel like, oh, I'm watching something special too. Just so expertly done.
Yeah. We should a couple things to point out about these sequences. Well, first of all, I didn't even mention really like the design of the Nebuchadnezzar and how the ship looks like. Really, it looks very plausible that this is like the last of humanity, right? It's this kind of filthy steampunk-inspired ship, and the vision we'd seen of the future prior to this was like Star Trek: The Last Generation. It just ended a few years before this. And that's like a much cleaner, hopeful version of the future. This is like kind of
Alien or something.
Yeah, this is very Alien-esque. Exactly right. Yeah. But I also like how the exposition continues. Right, like it never stops. You think that's air you're breathing now. You notice like Lawrence Fishburne basically is not out of breath for most of the dojo scene, which is amazing. When they emerge from the jump program, right, there's blood on his mouth. No idea what the physical mechanics of that are, but he's like, if you're killed in the Matrix, you die out here. The body cannot live without the mind. Like, all just very, like, effectively explaining what the rules of the place are. And then, of course, the woman in the red dress with the agent morphing into one of the characters. Very effective. And watching the Matrix Revisited, I was reminded that basically that sequence, right, obviously everyone is dressed in black and white, except for the one in the red dress. But the casting director hired twins and triplets for that scene to reinforce the idea that this is like a computer program. It's a very subtle effect that you might not even notice, but
that's kind of great.
And I love how they're dressed. There's
That's
like
cool.
sailors.
Yeah,
and,
sailors.
You know, it's like
nuns, right? Yeah.
It's like you know, somebody had stock character models in their computer program that they
all
just
the NPCs. Let's just run them.
Yeah.
Run down the street. That scene, by the way, is where I believe Morpheus explains, like, you know, these people, any of them can be an agent, right? They're all a part of this, and therefore they're all dangerous. And I think at the time that was a good way of explaining, like, oh man, are we just killing people? Are we just like offing these poor innocent people by doing this? And I think, you know, watching the whole like you know, the shootout sequence in the lobby for the first time, like that didn't really come into play. It's like, oh, okay, these people could all be bad, therefore it's okay that they're being killed. I think now we're kind of like, oh, I don't know about that. That's like one thing that's kind of lingering with me. If they were like, I think if it was even a line that was like, oh, by the way, like, I don't know, some way to explain it, like, even if you kill them, maybe they will be resynthesized into another virtual person somewhere.
They're dead.
They're dead.
You murdered them.
Here's what happens. Their body gets dumped out of the power plant and like turned into mush.
You did that,
is like,
you did.
You know what? They haven't taken the right pill yet, so they're part of the problem still.
I think something that is sort of boiling in the away in this movie that the movie is not really dealing with is that Morpheus is like a zealot. Like he's very radical. And the idea in the sequels is that when he returns to Zion, everyone's like, "Hi, Morpheus." You know, it's not like everyone's like, "Oh, it's Morpheus. We love him." Everyone's like, "Whew, that guy's a lot."
He's pretty extra. He's pretty extra.
He's quite extra. And I mean, Neo has to kill all those people.
Yeah, those people are all dead because of them.
Yeah.
But
he has fun doing it too. Like there's joyful killing, there's joyful slaughter. Yeah.
I think, you know, there's a couple of things that are worth thinking about, which is one is that anytime you see the agent jump into someone and then they shoot the agent, the Wachowskis like to show you the body reverting back to a dead person.
Yeah.
Rather than you just thinking like, okay, who cares? Like there's like, well, no, you know, that person got killed now, you know, because the agent was possessing him, but still. But I think that Morpheus's sort of calculation and the movie's kind of calculation is like, you know, they're never going to wake up. They're stuck in their gators anyway. So it's sort of it's unlikely. This movie is vaguer about like, oh, maybe we'll free everyone, but
there's never a plan of to free anybody talked about here.
As it goes on, in the sequels especially, you realize like, no, that's not really how this works. Like it's mostly people are in the Matrix and mostly people want to be in the Matrix. Like they have this sort of unconscious choice and they take it. Like, and that's That's sort of what Cypher represents. He's like, forget it, guys. Like, the real world sucks. They've built a much more compelling world with stake in it. And like, let's just do that instead.
That's another thing that struck me on the rewatch is I had remembered this movie as having a big turn. Joey Pants turns on the team. No, there's never they don't play that for dramatic turn at all. It just plops out. It's just him being a betrayer just sort of is presented to you very early and very just matter of factly. We don't even really have met him very well. We don't know Cypher at all. We're introduced to him as the betrayer, and I didn't remember it that way. I remembered it feeling like a big reveal that he's going to turn on them. But no, it's just sort of like, boop, he's having dinner with Agent Smith.
Yeah, I mean, so he's kind of an audience surrogate here as well. Like this idea that, hey, actually, maybe life in the Matrix isn't that bad, right? And I love that the little bit when he says, "I want to be someone important, like an actor,"
like an actor. Great job,
like Joe Pantoliano.
Character actor Joe Pantoliano. We all remember. Jeff, like that scene happens in the middle of the movie. It's not exactly early. Like I was clocking this. We spend 45 minutes before we even get out of the Matrix.
Yeah.
Like all the real world stuff, all the set building, and then you get to the ship and we're 45 minutes in. So like by the halfway point, okay, like it's early on in our relationship with this character, but certainly not early for the movie.
This whole time, right? All this, it's like this whole section of the movie is like lining up all these dominoes that the final act is going to just knock down in quick succession, right? You got the Joe Pantoliano, is the informant that is referenced in the opening scene of the film. Sentinels are introduced, and the one weapon we have against them, the EMP. You can't die in the Matrix or you die out here. All this stuff is introduced, right? And then like the final act is going to just somehow hit on like every single one of these things. It's amazing, like just from a storytelling perspective. So really appreciate this whole section as like an exposition dump that's done very creatively, very effectively. So then Morpheus goes to take Neo to meet the Oracle, and that kind of sets in motion the sequence of events that happens, like that takes us to the end of the film, right? They go to meet the Oracle. And so Dave Sims, I'm kind of curious like what your opinion is on this kind of the whole Oracle interaction, her whole deal, what she says to him, you're not the one, but then he is the one, but like maybe it's because he died first and then became the one, but the Oracle only tells you what you need to hear. Like, what do you think of this whole, what is your read on the Oracle stuff?
I mean, how nerdy do you want me to get?
Let's do this.
Let's say moderately nerdy.
In terms of the first film, the Oracle, I mean, she's a character who I feel like is so easy to stumble into all kinds of pitfalls with. She's this magical black lady. Yeah. The movie is sort of like, it's kind of like, wow, can you believe it? Like, she's a nice old lady, like, who makes cookies. Like, wow, you thought she was going to be something, like the movie maybe is a little too impressed with itself, revealing this like mundane person is the all. You
thought this would be like the Golden Child or something, and there's like some dragon behind a curtain. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I guess, you've got that scene right beforehand with the kid who's bending the spoon, and like, thank God that, yes, there is no spoon. Thank God that that's not the kid. That doesn't turn out to be Oracle or whatever. But I think that Gloria Foster, who the Wachowskis very good at casting, sort of underrated casters in general. Like a lot of the people in this movie who are unknowns, like Carrie-Anne Moss, like very good at finding these people. She's so good at being kind of like wicked and charming, and like with a little bit of world weariness. Like she's so good at not playing anything too hard, and like kind of making it seem like she's having a little fun with Neo rather than just, again, delivering more exposition seated from a chair and like give him all this circular dialogue. That I kind of love. I kind of love the scene. And in terms of the Oracle's like actual, like what you're saying, like she says he's not the one. Of course he is the one. And so what's she playing at there? In the later movies, she talks about how you can't see beyond choices you don't understand. And so I feel like her whole vibe with Neo is like, if I just sat down and told this guy he was the Messiah, you know, that's only going to lead to bad things, right? He's going to think of himself as this sort of invincible or entitled, ennobled sort of being. And obviously that's something he needs to figure out by himself. And he'll only figure it out by himself if he's not burdened with this, like, you know, this ridiculous prophecy. That's how I've always taken it.
I feel like it's all wrapped up in that one moment where she says, you know, it's okay about the vase. And he's like, what vase? And he turns and knocks it out. And she says, you know, what's really going to burn your noodle?
Bake your noodle, I think.
Bake your noodle, excuse me. Bake your noodle is, you know, would you have knocked it over if I hadn't said anything? That, I think, is the whole thesis.
Right. The whole free will versus choice concept. Right.
Right. It's if I tell you you're the one, you won't act like the one. I have to tell you you're not the one, so you will act like the one.
Right.
And that's I think that's baked into that moment of like, what's really going to bake your noodle, you know?
Yeah. I have to say too, like rewatching this movie now, I feel like personally, I'm a little tired of chosen one narratives in general. Like I'm very glad when superhero movies and, you know, genre pictures do something very different. I think something we kind of forget too is that the sequels really upended whatever this is. Like it is kind of genius what they did, even if the sequels.
They're so good.
Yeah, yeah. I you know, I love them for what they attempt to be, even if they aren't as exciting as this movie.
Just to do a 1 minute rant. That's exactly right. Like the whole point of the sequels is that Neo is now superhuman and he achieves the goal he's supposed to achieve, which is he gets into the core of the Matrix. And in the middle of the Matrix is a guy who's like, yeah, I wrote the chosen one narrative. Like, I'm the guy who wrote it. Like, we all, you know, humans like them. And so that's why you exist, because you're the only way the Matrix works is if it has a chosen one. So I had to write one in. And every time you have to end up here because that's how I write it.
Yeah. And there are many chosens before, and you're just the next one.
Yes, and of course the special thing the Wachowskis do is they make it be that, like, well, and the architect is like, well, you're different though. What's up with you? And the ways they've sort of layered that in through the movies are very interesting. But that I just love that idea that the sequel to this movie totally rug pulls the idea of the chosen one.
I love the idea. You know, I'm not a fan of Matrix Reloaded. I actually rewatched part of it and I couldn't get through it. I was like, this is still pretty painful to me. But I love the I love that architect scene. You know, when he explains like this has been the 6th time that this has happened, and I just love how fascinating that idea is. So anyway, so moving on, right? They talk to the Oracle. She tells me he's not the one. They go back. They're trying to exit. Deja vu in the Matrix. A lot of people get killed. Joey Pants gets out of the Matrix alive mysteriously. There is this funny moment. I don't know if you guys that
cool thing in the walls. Like, don't skip over that. Like, how cool is that?
So good.
Like
so
they had to build that vertical set for that.
Yeah,
it's
amazing.
So rad, and the way that like the physicality of that and how they can slide down the wall, like all of that is so inventive.
And then
cool.
like Morpheus having that big moment when he's like, you know, get Neo out of here. He's the only thing that matters. You know, like sacrificing himself. And it's like, and you just seen like the Oracle, you know, tell Neo. Oh, there's that moment when I think APOC like kind of flips the gun over and hands it to Neo and is like, I hope the Oracle gave you some good news. You know, like
so good. and
dude.
when Morpheus headbutts the agent. Yeah. And then the agent's like, I'll headbutt you like 16 times because I don't care about headbutts, you know?
That whole fight is so perfect too, because it's like we were introduced to the fight sequences at the beginning and the dojo, which are I think like, yeah, they're very Eastern in a way. This is like a knockdown, drag out brawl. Yeah. And I think this is the other moment where I wanted to jump up and clap, because I was like, this movie's doing everything. They're even doing like American style fight scenes better than than any other action movie at that time, certainly.
This is one of the times in the movie where I felt bad for the actors, because it just looks so uncomfortable. Like like Lawrence Fishburne has all this like crap all over his face, like all the dust and stuff. I'm like, this must have been excruciating to shoot. Anyway.
Yeah. In the behind the scenes, he's like, I'm allergic to all this stuff, and they just keep throwing it on me. Man, this is rough. There was that one moment, speaking of like indelible moments in this movie, the one moment where they punch each other, which was a mistake, and they kept it in because it just looks so badass and also so painful. And I think they even kept in like part of the sound or something.
Yeah. So then Cypher gets out, right? Joey Pants gets out and starts offing people one by one in the most horrifying and cruel way. And it's super creepy when he like interacts with everyone. Like he like jumps up on them, like so he's like straddling them, right? And this is amazing. Yeah, he's talking to Trinity in the Matrix while he's on top of her physical body, which is just like like I'd never seen anything like that before, right? That this guy can be interacting with this person while he's like interacting with her physical body in one reality, and then her actual personhood, her construct in another reality. I just think it's super fascinating.
Hey, is anybody else not able to hear Dave?
I'm getting a little bit of cutting in and out.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot.
Yeah,
of
me
cutting
too.
in.
Yeah.
Of me, David Chen. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's better now.
Okay.
It's just when you were on your
basically,
rant, like every other
didn't hear
word
any
was
of that.
kind of crapping out. A little
Okay.
bit, yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Is it back now? Is it okay now?
It
Is it
just
back?
happened as you were saying. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Like it just happened again. Maybe we need to reboot call.
Yeah. Okay. Let me reboot the call. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Hello.
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 How's this? Is this okay?
This is better.
All right. Let's
See if Skype pulls up.
Yeah. Let's hope this guy pulls up. So I was just talking about how he was interacting with Trinity in one reality, and then in another reality, it was blah blah blah. Can you guys hear me? Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Better.
Cool. So and of course the moments that I remember from this that's indelible to me is like when he's executing all those people, right? APOC, Switch. He's about to kill Neo, and she's like the not like this. I mean, that was it chills me to this day, right? That her line delivery of not like this, and then she has to like pretend that she's dead, right? Right after in the same shot. I just think that's amazing performance as well. By the way, like I read on this Vox piece about Switch that was a character that was supposed to be was supposed to hint at kind of the gender bending elements of the film, that Switch was supposed to be like a man in one reality but a woman in the Matrix. Right?
Switch was going to be a female in the Matrix.
Yeah.
Belinda McClory was only going to play female Switch, and a man in the real world.
Yeah. So they jettisoned
and
that
the
idea.
studio was like, "Fuck off! What are you talking
Well,
about?"
they thought it would be too confusing,
that.
or they thought it'd be too confusing to people, right? That
Yes,
people wouldn't
yeah,
get it,
yeah.
right? Yeah. So that's a
That's
bummer.
why
But
Belinda McClory is so androgynously styled. Like,
Yeah.
she has that very specific look.
yeah, but she doesn't like she doesn't have that much to work with in this movie, and I think she makes a lot.
Not
of it.
like this.
Yeah, not like this. That's right. Yeah, heartbreaking. And then Tank kills Cypher in like one of the most badass guy comes in at the last second to save the day, pulls him out of the Matrix.
I like how Cypher is like the only way you could possibly be saved is by some sort of miracle. Don't tempt fate, dude.
No, he doesn't
Don't
even say
tempt
that.
fate.
He says if he's the one, he'll be saved by some sort of miracle, right?
Yeah.
That'll
Didn't
prove
have
that
faith.
he's the one. And
Gotta
then,
have faith.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
it totally has a Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah. So then the final like last 30, 45 minutes, right, is just this nonstop action of them going in to save Morpheus. So many memorable sequences, lobby shootout, helicopter scene, helicopter crashing into buildings, all this stuff.
So many
Final
sequences,
fight
by the way,
sequence. Yeah.
Even still today, I'm like, how did you do that? Like, how did even I've seen a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, but even like the final shot of the helicopter, crashing into the building and rippling the glass, the camera angle from below the helicopter with the bullets just like falling down, and then the water is pouring out of the skyscraper and the broken window. Like, it's just so perfect, and it seems like an impossible shot in so many ways.
Yeah. Totally. Like that. So many incredible shots. So David Sims, let me ask you, like, as you're thinking of these final portions of the film, right? These like just nonstop set piece after set piece after set piece. Like, what visuals, what moments, what lessons stick out to you?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Just what lessons stick out to me?
Yeah,
You're
just
skipping a little.
sorry,
Dave.
just
Yeah.
what
You cut just there, yeah.
so just what from the ending sticks out to you?
Well, I like what you say about the relentlessness, but because it is certainly, it's exactly what you want in a sort of final act, right? It's like an incredible variety of action and all that. But what I love about it all is basically, like, even though it has not been a slog to sit through all of this information and all of this training and all of this sort of comprehension of how everything is going to work in this world, it is the perfect example of, like, you know, building up a, you know, building up a brick tower and like knocking it down. Like, everything that we've been learning about and understanding is being like thrown at us like really, 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 really rapidly. And we're like, of course I understand the Matrix, you know, the agents can do this and the Neo can do this, you know what I mean? Like, it's like suddenly all the rules are just sort of being lobbed at the audience, and like with such confidence. Like, it's so thrilling to sort of see everything come together like that. And then it's all action except that we're intercutting with Hugo Weaving monologuing. It's one last monologue. He gives that sort of like angry speech to Morpheus where he's like, I hate this. Like, this sucks. I have feelings about this. Yes, you're a virus. And yeah, we were talking earlier about how like sort of disgusted he seems with Neo's altruism as a human, helping his landlady and all that. And like, you know, like Weaving's been sort of peppering all that nastiness in, and it's such a final fun philosophical complex, philosophical question to throw at the audience of like, are the machines allowed to like, you know, have feelings too? Like, is this like, like not just sort of like a Terminator-esque villain to sort of plow through, but like, what's going on the other side of this world? Like, now that we've learned all about the Matrix and all about, you know, the fight for freedom, like, who are these creatures we're fighting against? And I like that they managed to weave that into the final act.
Mm-hmm. He seems like the only one who's like questioning what they're doing and why they're doing it. I think that's what makes Smith such an interesting villain too, because what Reloaded ends on him like being inside the body of somebody else, and that was the big twist for that movie. But for this one, it's sort of like, it kind of reminds me of Us in ways that if I talked about would bring up spoilers, but just the way
the movie Us you were talking about, right?
The movie Us.
Yep.
But I think just the way somebody you could consider to be bad, in a way, like they just want freedom too, and there's something even sympathetic about that, even though Smith is also a cartoonish B-movie villain at the same time.
Well, I will say the thing that strikes me from that scene is not how Agent Smith is feeling feelings and stuff. I mean, that's certainly very powerful. The idea that the machines are sentient and have their own preferences. The thing that strikes me is how, like, in the decades since The Matrix came out, I've been thinking about that monologue. And like, is he right? You know, the whole thrust of that monologue is about how humans
are disgusting.
Right, humans are disgusting. Yeah. They destroy everything that they colonize. Right, like unlike other mammals. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The unlike other mammals who like eventually come to peace with their surroundings. Like, we destroy things. We shape things into our own image, and often end up like ruining it in the process. And like, is there something inherently destructive, self-destructive about humanity? I just found that to be extremely thought-provoking, and it's a speech and a line of thinking that haunts me to this day. So definitely a great scene that's just dropping in all this major kind of.
I'm surprised Morpheus never was just like, "Hey, we made you." Okay, like apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but say it cooler with Morpheus' voice, please.
So the obviously the lobby shootout is, you know, incredible, slow motion. We've never seen anything like that. And then the other visuals that stick out to me are when the helicopter is going over the edge of the, like, it's like clearly failing. It's going over the edge of the building. You see this slow motion shot where Neo like reaches his arm around the helicopter like rope cable thing that he's attached to, and every time I watch that scene, I'm always like, what is he expecting is going to happen? Right? Is he like gonna?
I'm a hero now.
Is he gonna like hold the helicopter up? Like what? But then, you know, like Trinity like gets out of the pilot seat right in the nick of time, and then she kind of swings. This spectacular shot that was in the trailer, in the commercial, where she swings into the building with the nothing but the explosion in the background. And these are just like all-time great visuals that very few films have been able to replicate anything like them. We brought up Inception
That's
earlier.
also how, they were meant for each other, by the way. Like, that was all like them communicating basically telepathically. Like, I'm going to hold this, you jump onto that, and we'll walk away scot-free.
That's true. Yeah. There's like a balletic sort of like idea there. Like they're very in symphony.
Yeah.
But I will say that shortcoming in the movie, it's that she's in love with him. Like that. There is nothing in the movie. There's no time given.
I will argue that is not a shortcoming of the movie. Maybe the first couple times we see it, yes, but it goes to the core of everything Wachowskis have done since this movie. Like, it's probably kind of hokey. I think in America too, like, we're just kind of not used to this as being like it is like her saving Sleeping Beauty, maybe too earnest for most audiences, but I hear you, Jeff. I hear you. It doesn't seem supported enough in this movie. I just like their overall philosophy, and we see more of that in the other films.
I mean, it's a lovely, the fifth element is love moment, but and I appreciate the sentiment as an old softie myself and an idealist. I just don't think the movie earns her feelings to him at any point. It doesn't seem interested in even worrying about justifying that. She's just it is a cosmic thing that she loves him rather than something earned.
I think even looking at, like, rewatching the movie now, that opening phone call between her and Cypher, I got the sense that, man, is Trinity kind of like a stalker? Like, she's really paying it. Like, she is really into this guy. Certainly, I don't think the movie gives them enough time together to kind of blossom that romance in an organic way. But I think there's a lot of stuff peppered out there throughout.
Well, the Oracle tells you that you're going to fall in love with the guy who saves the universe. I think maybe you pay attention to who the candidates are.
David Sims, any opinion on the love story between Trinity and Neo?
They're both very attractive people, and I like it when attractive people in movies kiss.
They looked around the ship. Good. They were like, "We're going to do this, right?" Because not many other candidates.
Right. You have to remember. Right, she is the second in command on a ship of 9 people, and her options are incredibly slim. So they just added Keanu Reeves to the mix, so he's definitely going to be on her radar pretty much from the moment he arrives.
Yeah, I feel bad that Cypher never really had his chance with her, but it turns out he was both uglier than Keanu Reeves and also a terrible person. So
there is that.
Yeah.
And in the sequels, they sort of talk about this concept that the Oracle's whole gambit is that thing that she nudges the two of them together, and she has Neo, the one, fall in love with a person, whereas apparently all the previous ones are this more general Messiah type figure who fell in love with humanity and wanted to rescue all of humanity.
I remember that.
And that is the thing that the architect and the Oracle talk about very obliquely in both sequels. That is supposedly sort of what changed everything for these movies. Right, so obviously, yes, it's at the core of the Wachowskis' concept. I agree with you that they could do it maybe one flirty scene, something in the dojo, something in the construct. Who knows? The movie would certainly benefit from something like that, just from a pure screenwriting perspective.
It is funny now, like, thinking of the Oracle this way, by the way. Like, she is basically incepting these ideas into everybody. Like, it is like you can't directly tell them, but you can be like, just give them enough to let them lead themselves to the idea, and it kind of works in that respect.
So, massive chase sequence, incredibly shot, kind of hints of Point Break in there, in my opinion.
Hints of Point Break, yes.
With the
lots of handheld.
Yeah, lots of handheld camera running through hallways, running through these this city spaces, and then Agent Smith meets Neo before he's about to get to the exit. Oh, I like this scene where, actually, Jeff Kanata, we were talking about Captain Marvel a few weeks ago, right? And you were saying, if I could make a chase sequence where, like, one of the characters could transform into anyone, I would definitely do a lot more with it than they did in Captain Marvel. And I feel like this was the sequence that you were looking for, right? Which is like, he's transforming into a guy on the phone who's angry. He's transforming into an old lady who throws a knife at him.
Right. That's what you would do, right? That's any person person that sees them in the Matrix,
Right.
yeah, jump right in, baby. That's what, you know, like that's what one imagines that the machines are like, okay, everybody in the Matrix, you know, keep your eyes open, and then it's like, oh, we blipped them. Okay, jump over there. It's delightful.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. It is.
By
And then-
the way, before we get to the foot chase, I just want to quickly say that the subway fight scene between Neo and Smith is perfect. It is perfection, because this is before Neo has the full realization of his powers, and I think that leads us to a lot of the problems they had in Reloaded, where all of a sudden the fight scenes aren't as compelling because he could just literally twist reality in a way to like make himself win. He could fly away, he could do all these things. That subway fight is the very last action sequence where Neo is like basically struggling within the limitations of what he understands of the Matrix before he becomes a god.
So, David Sims, I want to be very conscious of the fact that we are running a little long here, and it's late on the East Coast. I am curious about what you have a high opinion of Reloaded. One of the common complaints of that film is that in Matrix 1 every fight scene had a purpose, and in Matrix Reloaded feels less so. Do you have any thoughts on that? If that'll take too long to get into, we can just keep trucking along. But
That's a fair question. I mean, I do. Yeah, the Reloaded has a little bit of excess in general in terms of the action. It feels. The Matrix is a very, very well calibrated movie in terms of story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you guys are saying. Whereas Reloaded, a movie I love it for its excesses and for its overreaches and stuff like that. It does sometimes feel like it's sort of like, hey, I guess like 25 minutes have gone by. Like, should we have like a car chase? You know what I
Let's
mean?
just throw in there. Yeah, there's less plot relevance and stuff.
I love the car chase in Reloaded a lot. I think that's the sequence that works the best, both in terms of like, you're kind of like, I can't believe they did this. This is, incredibly spectacular. But also that has the Keymaker, if you remember, who is a very vulnerable figure. So it has that's the sequence with a lot more stakes, because you're sort of like, this guy could die. Like there's a little more sort of like, oh no, like, a little more like the first movie. But yeah, I mean. Yeah. It's tough when Neo's a god. He's a god. He's a god. He's a god.
There's his first agent fight in Reloaded is a point where he's just like, upgrades, and like just like it is a boring ass fight. Like the choreography isn't
one
good.
Punch on.
Yeah,
right.
It's too easy, therefore not interesting.
Yeah.
But for the car chase alone, Reloaded is worth it, I'd say.
But this
Superman
sequence,
problem.
The subway sequence, right, is like is one of two critical moments in the film where Neo finally comes into his own, realizes who he is. Gets called Mr. Anderson, says, "My name is Neo." Like he's fully accepting his role as the one. Yeah. Which and then again, it kind of throws Agent Smith upwards into the ceiling of the subway, back down, then has to run away. So,
and by the way, Dave, did you ever think if you twist the letters around, Neo becomes one?
What?
Think about that.
Mind blown.
Do you have any proof of that?
This is me in high school, by the way. This is all the conversations we were having in high school.
So I'm going to have to check, because it's going to take me a while to rearrange all those letters.
The movie gave you all the clues. They gave you all the clues.
They were right in front of my face the whole time.
I like, so the final sequence where like they're trying to get Neo out, and he gets shot repeatedly by Agent Smith, who's like, "Oh, my job here is done," walks away. One of my favorite shots in the movie is this shot, like the Sentinels are like burrowing into the Nebuchadnezzar at this point, and there's this shot where you see Morpheus's face, and he just is like so dejected because Neo has just died. Like his whole belief system has been shattered, and then you see like in the background, out of focus, like the Sentinels like tearing in with their lasers, and he's just like, he's not even turning around, because he's just like, why am I even alive anymore? It's like a
Where's
brilliant,
my god now?
Brilliant use of like foreground and background to kind of tell a story. I thought it was great. And then Neo comes back to life. He sees the Matrix for what it is. He can see all the code. He kind of dives into Agent Smith, explodes him. And
the turn where he is having a fight with one arm is so rad. And that was another one of those Devendra Hardawar stand up and cheer moments for me. When I watched it, it was like, how better to, he's sort of like not even looking at the fight. He's just able to do it one-handed. It's just a brilliant expression of where he's gotten to.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, and the fact that he can like see the code
Yeah.
of the Matrix is very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Good movie.
Good movie, pretty good movie, yeah. So final sequence, the call on the phone, like something's messing with the code, and then Neo's like I'm gonna show you like not where things are gonna end, but how they're gonna begin. Rage Against the Machines "Wake Up" plays, one of the greatest movie endings of all time. So as we're wrapping up here, David Sims, any
Yes.
closing thoughts on the end of this film, movie as a whole? Any other reflections you haven't had a chance to share during our thoughts here on the 20th anniversary of The Matrix?
No, I mean, I could talk about the Matrix forever, as you guys might be able to tell. But the ending specifically is kind of it's amazing the needle they're threading here, where it's like very triumphant, incredibly open-ended, like doesn't feel too easy. It's like, after all that, Neo's huge triumph is that he beats one agent, right? Like and obviously he achieved this sort of enlightenment, and he is the one, but who knows what that means, right? And so I don't know how much the Wachowskis had thought through what their future plans for the movies were or anything like that, but it is the kind of sequel where you could really go anywhere, do anything. Like, the movie's sort of like promising this like incredible open world. I mean, Neo's literally promising it in his monologue, like it's the beginning of something. Maybe that's what sort of did the movies in. Obviously, it's part of what, helps the movie stay so relevant and helps people like, tell their friends to go see it and come. This movie was one of those weird movies that was #1 at the box office, went down to #2, and then went back up to #1. Like, it was one of those crazy word of mouth movies that you don't get a lot of in Hollywood. But
it was 1999.
Yeah.
People only had words of mouth. There was no other method of communication.
There was no
back
other.
then. Yeah.
Hey, don't you remember?
Jeff, what is the Matrix.com?
What is the Matrix.com?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man, that was an early good movie website.
I think it was a bunch of spinning, dancing babies, and there was a flying toaster or two, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there was a part that was under construction.
Yeah. So, I mean,
it reminds me actually the ending of the movie, the feeling I had, very similar to the feeling I had watching Unbreakable for the first time, where you get to the end of this incredible experience that's thrilling and surprising and revelatory and feels like something fresh and new, and you get to the end of it and you go, I haven't even seen the best part of this story yet.
Right.
Like,
so
this
you
is
thought. So you thought, Jeff.
This is a setup for the best part of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Devendra, any closing thoughts for us?
Closing thoughts. Perfect ending. I love this movie completely. I will say real quick, what makes this movie special, I think, is that it is the union of so many different types of pop culture. And this is not something we've seen very often, but when it works and when it clicks, it is hugely successful. So you think back to like Star Wars and what that did to like bring together pulp novels and like early sci-fi, Indiana Jones, of course, and I think maybe in a certain sense, like the Marvel movies have done that the way the Marvel Cinematic Universe has kind of brought together comic book pop culture into movies and kind of have made that work. I just think The Matrix is such a perfect example of that and such a milestone because of that.
All right. Well, I think
Totally.
we can wrap it up there. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, just quickly, as to the question of does it hold up? I think that seriously, there are some digital effects that are a little dated. A mouth that sticks together in a pretty rough way. It'd be nice to have some remastered effects at some points in these movies. But overall, I mean, it is timeless storytelling in a lot of ways. You talk about phone booths and it's still cool when you push a button on a handheld phone and the bottom pops out.
Yeah,
that's still cool.
I miss that. Yeah.
But a lot of it is done practically. Like when they do the lobby shootout scene, a lot of that stuff is like they detonated things in a thing that looks like a lobby, right? And it shows, and I think a lot of the film has aged extremely well, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
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 No, I agree. I think for me, Devindra, you talk about this pantheon of movies like that. For me, it's like Star Wars, The Matrix, Mad Max Fury Road. And I wish that Mad Max Fury Road sort of had that cultural footprint that The Matrix and Star Wars seem to have had. I don't think it has, but I think those are the movies that for me are like on my Mount Rushmore of, huge pillars of genre action storytelling.
All right. Well, we've got to wrap things up there, but you can find more episodes of this podcast at slashfilmcast.com. You can email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. Our theme song comes from adamwarrock.com. Our spoiler bumper comes from filmmaker Kyle Hillinger. This episode was edited by Beatty Zhang and produced by Beatty Zhang. And stay tuned to hear what we'll be discussing next week on the Slash Filmcast. In the meantime, David Sims, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
I'm a staff writer at The Atlantic, and you can find my work there most days. And my podcast is Blank Check. Please check us out. We've been going for years. We do directors' filmographies, film by film, me and my co-host Griffin Newman. And I'm on Twitter at David L. Sims.
All right, very cool. And you can check out David's piece about The Matrix at The Atlantic. It's called A Movie Like The Matrix Might Never Happen Again. And also, I'm just going to say, if you like Blank Check, I hope you like Blank Check, because we might have a Blank Check-related guest on the podcast next week as well. So I'm just going to throw that out there as well. All right, Jeff Kanata, where can we find more of your work on the internet?
Well, you can always follow me on Twitter at Jeff Kanata, which is spelled with 2 N's and 1 T. And I do a video game podcast as well. That is called DLC. You can get it wherever you get fine podcasts, or by visiting 5by5.tv/DLC.
How about you, Devindra?
Oh, at Devindra on Twitter, and I write about techandgadget.com. I'm doing a tech show at nomortech.net as well, so check that out. And David Sims, I just want to say, I hope you've noticed we did not make fun of where you grew up. This is a safe space.
Hell
Please
yeah.
come back.
Yeah. Thank you. That's right. I saw this film in England when I was 13 years old. I bought a ticket to She's All That, and then I snuck in.
Nice.
It was rated 15, which is the British rating. Yes, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Find all of my stuff at davechen.net. Subscribe to get emails from me at davechen.net/letters. Next week, the podcast will be reviewing Shazam.
Shazam.
Actually, I think it's Shazam. With exclamation point. I will unfortunately not be here on the podcast next week, but I will leave it in your gentlemen's very capable hands, and we will have a guest next week, and it will be an exciting one. So
Dave will not be here, but an older, much more muscular guy who looks a lot like Dave will. It's a strange.
Nice.
Played by the guy from Chuck for some reason?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Nailed it. Okay, thanks for listening to the Slash Filmcast. We'll see you next week. All right, David. I know that went a little bit long. Appreciate your time very much.
It was good.
Blank Check Love Fest going on the podcast this month. So
we appreciate it mightily.
All right, dude. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks guys.
man.
Thank you for talking.
Bye.
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 All right, guys. So let's just do the beginning of the episode real quick. I think it'll take like 10 minutes.
Can I run to the bathroom real quick?
Yeah, I'll do the same.
Yeah.
I'll be back. You there, Jeff?
I'm here.
So I think I want to make this Avatar trip happen if I can.
Yeah. I just was talking to my wife. She says it's cool, and we have a summer littered with commitments, so I have to give you some dates. But yeah, I'm excited.
Cool. That episode was fun.
It was. It was very fun. Very fun.
Very good.
Yeah, very fun.
And the sound is back to normal again?
It was rough the whole time for me.
Oh, is it rough now?
No, it's not.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I was worried it was me, but it didn't seem to be.
Well, sorry about that. Sometimes if there's like too many people on the call, it like gets weird.
I'm back.
Yeah.
All right, so I was thinking I would describe the end of the summer movie wager thingy, and you guys could make fun of me about it.
Sure.
You know, that's how we'd start things.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Okay. Here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Slash Filmcast. I'm David Chen, and with me are
Devendra Hardawar.
And Jeff Kanata.
welcome to the show, everyone. So, at the end of last week's episode, we said that we would kind of be leaving it up to the listeners what would happen over the course of the next few weeks. And in particular, there was a question about whether or not to include Avengers Endgame in the summer movie wager this year.
I don't think there was a question.
There was a very clear and well enunciated, obviously a question that was so perfectly framed that that left no ambiguity as to what we wanted to do or not do. Oh.
Yeah. So first of all, I want people to be clear on a few things. Number one, the conversation at the After Dark last week is a perfect representation of how we organize the show, right? If you're wondering, like,
It's
all the
not
behind
unique.
the scenes, that is how much work goes into every minor decision. Like that, imagine like that conversation happening for every what we've been watching that we discuss, and like you have a sense of what we do to make the show, right? So just want to call that out, right? But also, I got a lot of crap for like basically that After Dark segment made everyone hate me. I think is really how
it did not go the way you expected, did it? This was your Brexit, David.
This is
your Cameron.
This is my version of Brexit. That's right. So, I mean, I think many people said it was very, very dumb to offer only two choices of of like starting the summer movie wager for Avengers Endgame or on Memorial Day. Like that.
By the way, the only wise choice was somehow omitted from the quiz. I don't know about that.
If only every other person on the call had said that to you, Dave.
Yeah,
if only
it's
literally everyone else had said that in the time.
Nope, we are going forward with this public opinion. It's going to happen.
Well, here's the reason. I could not live with the hardware stratagem because I'm like, dude, we should either include Endgame or not. I did not. Anyway, we don't need to relitigate it. But the point being, Jason. So first of all, the people have spoken. Endgame will be in the summer movie wager. However, we were able
David
to carve.
will resign as prime minister.
Yeah,
effective immediately.
we were able to carve out some time later in the month to do the summer movie wager. So today we're going to be reviewing The Matrix, doing a 20th anniversary retrospective on The Matrix. Today, next week we'll be doing. Well, you'll hear what we'll be doing in the next few weeks on the podcast later on. But just wanted to call out that summer movie wager will happen. It will include Avengers Endgame. It will be recorded in the month of April. So get your list ready. I also wanted to give a shout out to Jason Rhodes in the Slack Filmcast, which you can join at slackfilmcast.com, who listed out the summer movie wager first movie every year for the last 12 years. And basically, he pointed out that in pretty much every single year for the last 12 years, we have started in May and April a couple of times. So like 2007, May 4th.
If only this data were widely available or known to the participants.
2007, May 4th, Spider-Man 3. 2008, May 2nd, Iron Man. And most recently, 2017, May 5th, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. 2016, May 20th, Angry Birds and Neighbors 2. I don't know why that's the case, but anyway.
Gotta get that Angry Birds in there, baby.
So it really wasn't, you know, it really
It's
wasn't.
almost like the entire discussion was a tremendous waste of time for everybody involved.
Yeah.
And we're all stupider for having heard it.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. So anyway, message received loud and clear. And Avengers Endgame will be in the summer movie wager. So the terrorists win. You guys, congratulations. No, I'm just
I
joking.
really, at some point, we need to talk about like when did the kernel of the idea that this was a problem for you, Dave? I really wonder when it started. Do you just wake up one morning and be like, "This doesn't make sense"?
It's the idea of it being in April, right? The fact that it was
Yeah,
April is what got under your skin, right, Dave?
Well, no. I think I expressed it very clearly, which is basically that we got several complaints of like, why did you even include this? It's going to be first. It's making the list less interesting. And that's
Complaints from email addresses such as Blavid Blen and
Mavid Men,
Shavid Den and
Shavid Den. Yeah.
Yes, but when presented with a perfectly good strategy for fixing that, we were like, no.
Well, now that we've had the conversation, I'm cooking like maybe I should put something else in first place. Maybe just to spite you guys, just to make it so that the Heart of War stratagem wouldn't have worked. You know. So I'm thinking about it.
Purposefully lose just out of spite.
I'm thinking about it.
Do it. Please do it. Yes.
Okay. Anyway, we have a very special guest on for our review of The Matrix, and we're going to get to it in a moment. But before we do that, we just want to thank all the donors who donated to the podcast this week. New subscribers at the rate of $2 per month: Joseph Johnston, Ben Richards, Del Nakamura, Optipes, Roy Rubin. I think that's how you pronounce that. Anyway, sorry if I got any of those wrong. Feel free to write in and correct me. Thanks also to donors Chad Franks, Boyd Martis, Robert Clark, Ben Richards, and Joseph Johnston, who writes into the podcast. Dave DeVinger and Jeff, I started listening to the Slash Filmcast 2.5 years ago, the summer before I started grad school. Your excitement about film and positivity about life have been a highlight of every week since. I just passed my qualifying exam, so I wanted to send a donation as a thank you for helping me get through all my homework and studying. Looking forward to your next 500 episodes. Best, Joe. Thanks so much, Joe.
Congratulations, Joe, on getting through.
Congrats on the qualifying exam, and glad that our very important discussions about what should be in the summer movie wager were here to help you entertain you, right, throughout that whole process. So if you want to contribute, you can always go to paypal.me/filmcast. That's paypal.me/filmcast for a one-time donation. Please do not donate if it in any way causes you hardship. But if you want to throw some cash our way and have extra money to spare, we'd appreciate it. It does help us defray the cost of doing the show, seeing movies, putting it on for you. So, yeah, that's all the donors this week. Let's get to our review of The Matrix. Okay.
Good stuff.
Cuckoo.